now.
Okay.
And it should be recording.
Hello, and welcome to the Worst Bestsellers bonus video, where we cannot stop talking about The Wig, the Bitch, and the Meltdown by Jay Manuel, aka Pablo Michaels.
AKA The Devil Also Wears Cheap Shoes. My favorite title / tagline / attribution to the author. I have no idea what that is in relation to everything else on the cover.
I do have a sneaking suspicion that Jay Manuel maybe never has read a book before.
I also had that thought.
Or he's only read like self-help books that he alludes to Pablo reading.
Well, we know he's read, he name drops James Patterson at one point, and he name drops the Da Vinci Code. So he's at least aware of one author and one book.
He does specifically refer to Divergent as a movie trilogy.
Oh yeah, and Divergent. I forgot about that. I like freaked out when I saw Divergent there. I was like, what is happening?
Well, and so I pulled that quote and I put like every part of it is almost right. Because he calls it, he says, the young model hopefuls have been eliminated like unwanted factions in the dystopian movie trilogy Divergent.
Oh, that's like, so close to.
Yeah, like there are factions, and like technically they're all eliminated kind of at once. Like, and then there were supposed to be 4 movies, but I think maybe there are only 2 movies.
There were 2, and then there was like a TV movie, and then I don't know if the last one ever got made because no
one cared.
Great, yeah.
No one cared.
Can we also talk, since we have visuals now? I resisted mentioning this in the non-visual podcast. The Jay Manuel on the cover has no nose, and I find it very upsetting. It's he's got cheekbones that'll cut ya, and no nose, like Voldemort.
The cover,
like an alien.
It looks very much like those like doll makers that they have online.
Yes, like design your own Barbie.
Yeah.
And then when I was a kid, we went to FAO Shores, the toy store, and they had like, you would design it on a screen, and then the Barbie you designed would like come out on a conveyor belt.
That's so cool.
It was very
cool. I want to do that.
I was very disappointed when I went back as an adult and FAO Shores no longer had that feature.
I bet you could do it online, but it wouldn't be the same.
Not the same.
Hey, I know we said we couldn't stop talking about it. Should we backtrack and just say, like, if you're watching this, probably you already listened to the episode we recorded, but if you didn't, you should. I think this is intended just as a follow-up, just because we truly had so much to say and we didn't want the podcast to be like 17 hours long, but we had so much to say. And also welcome back, Mackenzi Lee. I want, noted fashion photographer, best-selling young adult author.
No, that's how I'm going to introduce myself from now on, is noted fashion photographer Mackenzi Lee.
So we recorded the episode. It just in case for whatever reason you were like, I'm going to click on this without having listened to it. Jay Manuel was a reality TV personality who was on America's Next Top Model. He wrote this book. It is technically fiction, but it is basically like a memoir in fiction about the beginning of America's Next Top Model, told through the eyes of his fictional analog, Pablo Michaels, who is working with Keisha Cash to create Model Muse, the model reality competition TV show.
That's a great summary. Can you just take that and drop that into the start of the podcast? That was more coherent than anything we said on the podcast.
Yeah.
I want to read, so I did some research, and I want to read some quotes from Jay about this book.
Okay.
So this is one from an interview with Jezebel, and he says, I was going against some literary conventions, and it was a big risk in blurring some lines and breaking the fourth wall with that kind of metafictional mechanism I have in the last third of the book. But it was something I wanted to do, he said of his craft. He calls his book an identity piece. He says he was mentored by a creative nonfiction writer whose identity he would not reveal, with no background in reality TV. Thus providing...
the nonfiction mentor is saved in Jay's phone as ICE.
Oh my God.
It's Pablo Michaels. Everything goes in a circle.
Oh my God.
Sorry,
cannot
keep going.
confirm or deny. He would not reveal. Okay, with no background in reality TV, thus providing a fresh springboard for the world he was creating, or recreating, or whatever. That's from the Jezebel, not me editorializing. Then the announcement of the wig, the bitch, and the meltdown came in the thick of the social media reassessment of ANTM early in quarantine. The timing seems felicitous, and Manuel's book is out via Wordy, which is not self-publishing per se. There is an approval process and there are editors, according to the website of the, quote, 360-degree publishing platform, but it's not exactly coming to us through a deal with a major publishing imprint, which generally takes about a year to turn around. Manuel claims he's had the idea for the book since 2014 and dove back into it in 2017. He denied that the expiration of the ANTM non-disclosure agreement he signed, which he said occurred in 2018, had anything to do with his putting pen to paper, but did concede that the ensuing freedom provided a safety net.
Jay.
Yes.
Jay.
But then there's this, okay, so there's that. And then this other interview he did with Fast Company, this part is kind of, he says, I thought I've got this idea, but it completely breaks literary conventions. Can I do this? I knew that in the last third of the book, I wanted to blur lines and break the fourth wall to kind of jolt the reader in their own world and take a look at the relationships around themselves. Manuel also underscores the fact that he didn't use a ghostwriter. Quote, I felt it, yeah, we know. Quote, I felt it was really important for fans to read my writing. That's what kind of took so long. It was a very isolating, but probably one of the most rewarding processes for me because I got to know myself. I had not dug down deep and taken the time to really learn more about those vulnerabilities that were buried deep down. So for me, it turned out to be one of the most fulfilling works I've put out into the world.
Oh, good Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, Jay, we know nobody's accusing you of using a ghostwriter.
Which is why
we would not besmirch the good name of ghostwriters.
It's so wild the way that he like goes all in on Keisha writing her book. And then to have this be the book that he wrote, I can't, that level of non-self-awareness, like I can't grasp it. Maybe it's because I'm a person with anxiety, but I can't fathom it.
So for your listeners who haven't had the displeasure of reading this book, they're in the middle of the book when Keisha Cash publishes her like Model Land equivalent called Planet Fierce. Mm-hmm. There is a New York Times review of the book written by the New York Times Review. Well, first of all, the title of the review is "The Catwalk Launches but Fizzles Out in Space." What does that mean? The subtitle is "A Galactic Supernova for Black Women Implodes into a Black Hole." And the author is Dr. Baraka C. Karenga.
Yes. Mackenzie, could you read some of it? Because I know we talked about doing it as a dramatic reading and then decided Duarte is very interested now.
Yeah. Also, I would like to note that this review was published August 14th, 2020, which is maybe the day the book came out. So I think he was trying to be clever, but also that means this much of the book is set in the future. Yeah. And also that at the end when they when there's like the little attributions of like page count, price, everything, the publisher's name is Skinning and Grinning. Don't know what that means or what it's in reference to, but it's very upsetting.
It's one of those things where it's like, is that racist? Like there were things in here where I'm like, I have to search for this because I haven't heard this phrase, but it seems somehow racist.
I feel like so Jay never talked about on the show that he's biracial. That never ever came up. And he's a pretty, he looks like this. He's a pretty white presenting dude, especially with like the silver hair and it never comes up. And so in the show, he will often adopt kind of like a what's the word? The appropriative speech. What's that called?
Oh, like a black scent?
I don't know what it's, but he kind of will do this, like he'll put on his like black voice almost, which sounds terrible, and I hate that. And it always
like hey guys, but it's also kind of like a greetings fellow kids vibe.
Yeah, but it always made me uncomfortable because I just wanted to be like, Jay, you're white, and especially when you have like Miss J and Tyra right next to him, it always made me a little bit uncomfortable. And then suddenly out of nowhere, he's come out and is talking all about being biracial and being adopted, which is another thing that never gets mentioned on the show ever anywhere, and gets mentioned in this book, but I've never, and I'm not adopted, so I don't know, but do people normally bully each other for getting adopted? Like, is that a big...
That's right. That's what was so weird, that that Keisha was like blackmailing him about this.
I know, about the fact that he is adopted. It's like, no, that's a thing.
I mean, I will throw this out there. Here's one singular point in favor of Jay Manuel, which is that I feel like there are a lot of books out there written by people who haven't been adopted, who are writing an adoption narrative that very heavily like leans on, I need to find my birth parents, I need to find my real family that abandoned me. And the fact that Pablo is very like, nope, I'm not interested in her. Like, I have parents, they are the people who raised me and who have been there for me and who are continuing to support me, and I have no interest in connecting with someone who, you know, was not a part of my life prior to this. Like, I'm very happy with my parents as they are. So I did appreciate that one singular thing in the whole 7,000 pages that it felt like of this book. So that's one point
True.
in his favor.
Okay, there's a couple things I want to say. First, I think we didn't really especially get into this in the podcast, but Mackenzie's described herself as a Next Top Model super fan, and I think Kait has said she's only seen one episode. And I guess I'm in the middle, but the experience that I've had with Top Model, and I was talking to my coworker / friend of the show, Anna, recently, and we were both had the exact same memories of in college, whenever we would go back to our parents' house, there were like 7 cable channels that at any given time would be showing reruns of Next Top Model. And so anytime it was, you know, winter break or spring break and we were back home, hey bud, hey, just watching, just sort of, it was always there. It was always this presence. And so I never really watched a season like on a weekly basis, like following it actively. It was just sort of like always there. And so I feel like, you know, I do have this familiarity with the judges and the tyraisms of it all more than I'm attached to any particular model. And that said, with my previous level of familiarity with Jay, I guess I sort of assumed that he was Latino because I thought Manuel, you know, and then
he says it Jay Manuel.
Manuel, okay.
Manuel, because we're fans of Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my ANTM experience is very similar to yours in that when I was in college, in my freshman year, I lived with a group of women who I very much looked down upon and had kind of a like not like other girls complex. And I was like, oh, I like books and they like Top Model. And they would watch Top Model constantly. Like Saturdays, it would just be, again, like one of those 7 cable channels. It was just on reruns in our apartment all the time.
So you were the Elise of your house.
I was the Elise, indeed, yeah.
Who I just rewatched season 1, and Elise is the model who thinks she's too smart for modeling, and she comes off as like a huge bitch to everyone.
Oh, it's wonderful. I love Elise. And so I would like pass through the living room while it was on, and I would do that thing where I'm like, I'm not interested in this show, as I like would stand there and make pasta for 3 hours, like watch. So that was my sort of, I fought it for a while because I had this complex about like, that's a fashion show and fashion is stupid. And I don't remember how I ended up, I think it was probably just on Hulu and it started coming up. And I've now watched probably every cycle of Top Model at least 15 times, usually just in the background. Like sometimes I put it on when I'm writing, sometimes I put it on when I'm cooking. I had a period in my life where I was dealing with mental health stuff and couldn't fall asleep unless I had Top Model playing in the background. And I've had so many dreams because of this where I'm on America's Next Top Model that I feel like I have been on America's Next Top Model.
Incredible.
So I'm deep in with this. And I understand the ridiculousness of it and the absurdity and the problems, and I love it all anyway. And so I flagged every time there's a reference in this book to anything in Top Model. And that's everything from like when in here he says, you're Miss Soybean, Miss Soy whatever, you're Miss Soy something. And the girl's like, oh, it's Miss Soybean. He goes, soy latte, whatever, which is a direct quote from season 1. to the part where a model named Mandy has sex with an Italian model that comes over to their house, which is something that directly happens in season 2 to a model named Shandy, which like way to not even be subtle. And also Shandy's boyfriend on the show, I believe, was named Eric, which Jay makes the name of the model she like sleeps with and cheats on her boyfriend with. And then also all of this is happening in the book concurrently to Keisha Cash having her own like pregnancy scare. And I just want to know if Tyra Banks was also having like a pregnancy scare while Shandy's like fucking hot Italian models in Milan. And it's like a really iconic moment in the show where she's like has to call her boyfriend, and it's so painful to watch. And she's like calling her boyfriend, and they're like taping on the other end of the line. You just hear him go like, "You had sex," and it's awful, but I love it. And I would highly recommend you look it up because it's just mortifying.
Well, and that's the effect the whole book has, where you're like, there's these things that are so specific and so immediately mappable onto real people and real events, and then these like buck wild things that you've never heard of, and you're like, oh well, did any of this happen? Because you're clearly framing it that way. But in other interviews, like Jay consistently refers to this book as satire. And I feel like satire is doing a lot of work here to just be like, oh no, it's all satire, so none of that happened. But it's not really a satire.
I don't think he knows what that word means, to be honest.
I wish I kept a list as I was reading it, because I did some like the relationship I feel, Mackenzie, that you had to Next Top Model, I had to Law and Order. So like that was my, like I did the exact same thing. I still do it. Like I'll put on a Law and Order or a Criminal Mind in the background, or a Forensic File while I'm doing anything. And I've seen them all 100 times. So I 100% get that. But like Renata said, the only exposure to the actual show that I ever had is when we read the Model Land book. We watched the episode of Next Top Model that was based on Model Land, where she had them do a Model Land trailer.
One of my all-time favorite insane episodes of Next Top Model.
It was pretty bonkers.
Laying on the ground in Greece wearing a wedding dress, pouring whipped cream into her mouth, and they're like, don't be too sexy. And Allison's like pretending to be a cat and eating blood oranges and has this like weird cat helmet. And then they all have to whisper into the camera like, I am Tukey. It's my favorite episode. I really want to do a group Halloween costume of everyone in the yellow dresses with their like gladiator helmets on, and they're like running through Greece. So if anyone wants to get in on that, let me know. Speaking of that episode, though, so that episode happened in the All-Star cycle, which had the big controversy of Angelique Preston winning. Angelique Preston, who follows me on Instagram, because why? Don't know. Love it.
Because you're a hashtag influencer.
No, because I'm a noted fashion photographer. He's just trying to get in. So there is a part in the book that we kind of talked about on the podcast where a contestant named Kayla has sex with one of the producers, and then there's back and forth. I can't remember where it lands about whether she like gets kicked off, but then she gets brought back, and then she's supposed to win, so she won't blackmail them, but she doesn't win. And I mentioned this on the podcast, but so Kayla is the name of a model from one of the cycles who like came out about being sexually assaulted during, which I just think is so shitty of Jay, because I'm like, and she like spoke to him specifically. I'm like, this girl whose name is associated with this show talked to you about being sexually assaulted when she was a kid, and you use her as the girl who's like sleeping her way to the top, which I think is so shitty. But also I think it's very clearly supposed to be an analog for Angelique Preston, who was the original winner of All Stars. And then there's always been some kind of like, nobody quite knows what happened, but she got stripped of her title, and they redid the judging, and they appointed Lisa D'Amato the winner, because who knows why. And the rumor was that she lost her spot because in her time between her cycle and All Stars, she worked as an escort because she couldn't get work. And one of her clients was a producer on Top Model. And then they got to the show and the producer was like, oh no. But then there's also a rumor that the winner of the cycle Angelique was on knew that Angelique worked as an escort, and she was the one who like ratted on her to Tyra. There is drama around this. But so I was just
wow.
I think that's what that part is supposed to be in the book. But I was just so infuriated that he used Kayla's name in vain, because I love Kayla. And she's like the best. There's a series of lesbian contestants on the show, and she's the best of the lesbians, and I love her. Anyways, I just flicked open to that part, and I just had written in big letters in my margin, like, Kayla, Angeli. Okay, that's it. I feel like that was the moment.
Yeah, I wish I had kept so as I was reading it, there were things that were coming up. I did some light Googling because I feel like it is very difficult to understand the intricacies of this book without at least a little bit of background in all of this. And I wish I had kept a list because the Googling that I did was enough to recognize some of these things happened. Some of these things that I'm reading about absolutely did happen on the show. So every time something really bonkers happened, one of my questions was, and Renata actually answered this on the podcast, was Tyra's mom arrested on cops and framed for stealing jewelry?
Oh God, wouldn't that have been a better novel than this too? Good Lord.
So there were just these bonkers things that I was like, is this a true one or a not true one? I can't tell. And I should have kept a list, but
well, it makes all the things that we don't see on the show, we talked about the Pablo being sexually assaulted by Mason. So it makes those things kind of go did everything else really happen? So did this really happen? Which is just it's an unsettling kind of uncanny valley of truth that I don't care for. And if I were any of the people who are in this book, I would never speak to Jay again.
Yeah, right.
Right. Well, and I did some Google researching, and I was really expecting to have a Jezebel or someone just sort of go through and be like, here's the real, here's the fake, here's the real. And no one that I've seen has done that yet, in a print blog or whatever. And maybe it's because they don't want to get sued, but maybe it's because no one wants to read this whole book.
Wait, this is what I've been waiting for. Do you think I could get paid to do that somewhere?
Yeah. Mackenzi, pitch it. I want to read it.
Oh my God, I've been waiting. I knew I
want to read it
in
easy
top model for something.
In easy listicle form. I want to read it.
Yeah, someone call BuzzFeed, please. Can I read some of the New York Times review of Keisha?
Oh my God, yeah, I forgot that's what we were going to do.
Okay. I kept doing it too. I kept flipping it open. Okay, so I'm just gonna start in a random point. Unlike her fashion spreads that are brief and tasteful, this tome is replete with literary cliches. The reader is subjected to a visual blitzkrieg of repetitive scenes where we are to be amazed at the Amazonian beauties who have weapons that, quote, fiercely kill, fiercely maim, fiercely decimate, fiercely torture, fiercely conquer, end quote, parentheses. Did I say fierce? As someone who regularly works with words, I was rendered apoplectic at the basic disregard for variation in language structure and the simple need for a thesaurus. Can we just, what kind of lack of self-awareness that you write that paragraph in your book in which everything has 5 adjectives preceding it?
It's so close.
He's
so close to getting.
Do you think this is maybe the meta part he's talking about? He's the third. Also, can we talk about that? Can you think of any examples where the author inserts themselves as a character in their own book, but not just specifically where the author inserts themselves, but where the author inserts themselves to essentially tell the main character, who is obviously a stand-in for them, that they are their greatest inspiration in life, so that the author is telling their younger self I was thinking Lemony Snicket in Series of Unfortunate Events, but he's A, not a real person, and B, doesn't actually I don't think he ever interacts with the Baudelaires in the books. It's just in the show.
Yeah. I was thinking also of, and this isn't quite the same, but The Fault in Our Stars has been in my mind for a couple of reasons. One of which is in The Fault in Our Stars, Hazel Grace is always watching America's Next Top Model because it's always on. And I was like, this is very relatable. You're a very relatable cancer teen. But then they also have, and it's not John Green, and it's not even really a good John Green self-insert, but it is about going to meet the author, and the teens in this book are going to meet the author of this other book to receive wisdom from him. But that's different and better than this.
Whenever I think of examples where it's an author, and it's a fake author though.
Right.
Kind of My Brilliant Friend. Oh God, I feel so bad comparing Elena Ferrante to Jay Manuel. It just seems like such a disservice to
I feel like, I mean, it's gotta be, it has to be there's such a narrow swath of people who could even attempt to get away with it. Because in order to like self-insert yourself into a book in that way, like you have to be well known enough as a person for it to make sense.
Or
So,
think of yourself as well known enough.
yeah, like, because it just doesn't, well, like you have to be well enough known as a person, or like you also like, because at some point if you're not influential enough or well known enough, I imagine at some point an editor is going to be like, but it's just like, it feels like such a unique place to be in to pull it off.
I'm also thinking of I want to say in like, I don't know, some college intro class we read the book Sophie's World by Jostine Gardner. I'm looking it up because I don't remember the name. And that's like a philosophical novel where she learns that she's in a book, and the whole thing like kind of, and it's like, whoa, like she realizes she's in a book, and like, what is it's like kind of like Matrixy. I don't know if you guys read that.
No, but
heard of
you know
that.
what it does, all this does remind me of is like way back in the like fanfiction.net days where the authors would insert themselves into the stories to give advice to the characters. It is very much like that.
I thought of that all the time when I was reading this. Like, I kept wanting to call it self-insert fanfic.
Yeah, it is that.
Can we talk briefly about, because this is something I wanted to do in the podcast, just the level of prose in this book. He has so many adjectives, first of all, and so many adverbs. Usually there's like at least 5 per noun. And then also, I think there's a lot of times when he just doesn't understand words and what words mean. Like, I've flagged a couple. He says about him, because him and Keisha eat ice cream a lot together, and he describes them as all-night ice cream binging orgies, which, like, okay, what is that? What? They looked like 2 pigs fighting under a blanket. Like,
I feel like
why? Let's see. Coco Rocha is described as her heart-shaped smile spread across her face, which shouldn't be her smile spread across her heart-shaped face, because she is known for having like a very distinct heart-shaped face.
I didn't even notice, because, and I read that for my read aloud, and I think my brain just processed it as heart-shaped face because that's sane.
Yeah, because that's sane. The gutsy supermodel picked up her bag and sauntered past her silent adversary. Like, why? Why do we need?
Okay, I thought that sounded familiar. Two pigs fighting under a blanket is a quote from Steel Magnolias, so I will give him a pass for that.
Oh, okay. It's Steel Magnolias.
So I Googled books where authors insert themselves, and I found a list of 5 that came up as 5 times best-selling authors put themselves in the book and nailed it. One of them I remember is Stephen King in the Dark Tower novels. I think it's the last one. I haven't read all of them, but in the last one, his like actual car crash happens, and he is a character like within the mythology of the book, and those books are like pretty meta. David Wong in John Dies at the End, which I've never read. Over the course of the novel, we have to wrestle first with the idea that David Wong in the story is the David Wong, the author. Later, we have to wrestle with the idea that David Wong in the story is not even the David Wong we thought he was, which didn't read that. Kurt Vonnegut in Breakfast of Champions.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yes. And Clive Cussler in the Dirk Pitt novels. He routinely inserts himself into the books when his characters need help or advice. He casts himself as the Deus in the stories Deus Ex Machina. And Dirk Pitt was widely regarded as a fictionalized version of Cussler to begin with. And then the last one is Bret Easton Ellis in Lunar Park. And of course, Bret Easton Ellis has written himself into one of his books.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I think you missed one, because The Wig and the Bitch and the Meltdown isn't on that list, and I don't know why.
Well, surely it just hasn't been updated. Surely you just had an older post.
Also, I just opened randomly to the page where they go to Tavern on the Green and Beth eats herself into anaphylactic shock and has to get her leg cut off, which is a sentence I never thought I would say for any reason ever. And there's just a rant. First of all, Jay hates Tavern on the Green for some reason.
Yeah.
There's like a whole thing about like no A-list or Z-list stars would ever be seen at Tavern on the Green with their shitty food. I was like, what do you have against Tavern on the Green? But there is a line where he's going through Central Park and he says, today they were on a Cinderella carriage style ride through the park. It was times like this, however short-lived, that made the reality of their borrowed lives worthwhile. And I just read an incredibly pretentious literary fiction novel, and the fact that the Venn diagram of those two, I think, is like that sentence. It's just like, this broke my brain.
Well, also, what I thought was wild, so he calls out Tavern on the Green for being only for tourists, and then Tyra's favorite barbecue place, Virgil's. I didn't look up, see if that is A, real, or B, based on anything real.
I was wondering that.
But it's in Times Square, and like, there's nowhere in Times Square that any celebrity would go to as a regular hangout. Like,
he also calls out Tim Gunn randomly when he goes on one of his architecture diatribes, which he does a couple of times. So there's the one where he describes Pablo's like Patrick Bateman creepy white apartment, and then there's one where he talks about the building, I don't remember, 432 Park Avenue, and he goes on for like a page and a half about the history of this building, and it says other critics had scoffed at 432 Park's slenderness and simplicity. Fashion consultant Tim Gunn described the building as, quote, it's just a thin column. It needs a little cap. A, why are you quoting Tim Gunn? Like, B, why is Tim Gunn an authority on the architecture of this building? Why are you throwing shade at Tim Gunn? There's so many random, just like, this book is name dropping in terms of both things like Tim Gunn and then also like Apple or MacBook Air and Apple TV and
Siri.
The point where
Siri, and all these things that
lost it and like had to said out loud and then had to explain the entire book to my roommate. So I'd explain to her why I just screamed, all MacBooks are portable, but he refers to it as her portable MacBook Air. And I don't know why that was the tipping point that I was just like, I'm done now. Cause all MacBooks are portable. That's the point. Virgil's is a real restaurant. It's on 44th.
Kait, it has 3 locations. It has one in Times Square, it has one in Las Vegas, and it has one in the Atlantis Resort in the Bahamas. So you know that's like a cool, authentic barbecue place that Tyra Banks definitely goes to regularly. What?
Yeah. I mean, she has to pick somewhere that has locations in all the places she goes because she's such a gross fatty that she has to eat her ribs all the time. Also, she's described at one point as the semi-svelte model. I was like, what the fuck, Jay? Like, he can't seem to decide if he like wants to embrace. I mean, and I think this is a little bit true of Tyra herself on the show. Jay can't seem to decide if he wants to embrace the fact that she is like a curvy woman and started her career as like a very like flat-chested high fashion model and then sort of like developed and then became a Victoria's Secret model and now is just like has a gorgeous body but is like has gotten older and that's what happens to people and their bodies change. And you can feel Tyra in the show kind of like, do I lean into this or do I ignore it? And she has like a thing she did on her talk show one time where she like wore this swimsuit that the paparazzi took unflattering photos of her in, and you can feel Jay kind of doing the same thing, but it feels grosser coming from Jay that he's just like constantly making comments on her body where he's like, she's gorgeous but could stand to lose a few pounds. And I'm like,
yeah,
okay.
She's gorgeous, but she looks like an overripe melon in her one-piece suit. Like,
yes.
Okay. Also, melons don't get more round the more ripe they are.
Well, speaking of, again, like metaphors that just don't make sense, like that one. I had Pablo felt like a mother who'd just given birth and had been told she was pregnant again, but wasn't going to get 9 months to recover. Again, does Jay understand how heterosexual sex works? Because not a 9-month recovery after pregnancy. That's not the 9 months part.
Yeah. Circling back to, I don't even remember what. One of the other tabs I had open is Jay talking about how, like, as Tyra has more recently been called out for some, like, her blackface challenges and things like that she would do. And he has talked about how, like, yeah, I thought that was all whack, but I was too uncomfortable to say anything.
I call bullshit on that. I think that is Jay straight up rewriting the past, because he's like, if you watch the episodes, you can tell how uncomfortable I am. I'm like, no, you look very comfortable. Like, you look totally fine. Because I remember being uncomfortable with how comfortable you seemed with this. Lots of the models seem very uncomfortable with it, particularly the women of color on the show, but Jay seems fine with it on the multiple instances they do it. In fact, at one point there's like a whole thing where he like talks one of the models into like she's already a Black woman, but they like take her skin tone darker so she can be Grace Jones, and he does this whole thing. And like, I get it, and I get what Tyra's trying to do, and I get the idea of like, of colorism, and we think that darker skin is less beautiful, and so this Black woman doesn't want to have darker skin I get it, but still, this is deeply uncomfortable and not the way to address this. And I have so much more respect for Tyra Banks, who has like come out and said like, yeah, we made some mistakes, you know, hindsight is 2020, I kind of fucked up, but it's there forever, so you just kind of gotta like, it's there. Yeah. As opposed to Jay, who's like, I was so uncomfortable, but I was told I couldn't say anything. I'm like, okay, whatever. Sorry, I call bullshit on that. I was like,
What is Jay doing these days besides becoming a non-best-selling author?
As far as I know, that's it. I think he does stuff for like entertainment. No, e-news. Like he does some corresponding stuff. And that's another thing that in the book, Pablo becomes like a red carpet correspondent, which I know Jay has done in the past. And he's talked about working on like those kind of entertainment celeb gossipy shows. So who knows, maybe he'll have a talk show. his lifelong dream. So his lifelong dream is also to be a singer. When Tyra or Keisha decides to be a singer, and there's like one offhand line where he's like, as a teen he always dreamed of being a singer. It's like, really?
That was another part where I was like, did this really, where he talks, where they think that it's gonna be the Keisha and Pablo show, but then, so like my question had been like, I know Tyra Banks had a talk show, like was Jay involved?
So that's another thing that blurs reality a little bit. As far as I've heard on like ANTM Reddit, which I do frequent, thank you, is that's what happened, is that it was gonna be her and Jay, and then she ditched him. Ooh. For some reason, whether to get he's never confirmed it, she's never said anything, but there has been like gossipy rumor mill that is a real thing that happened. There is also some like, there's just so much specific shade throwing in here, where like when Keisha does her song and she tells all the models, she's like, I've been working on this song for 16 years or however long it is. And there is a part in that episode of Top Model when they record the music video where Tyra's like, she does like a talking head in the moment thing, and she's like, I've been ducking out of studios for 5 years recording this song, and it's such a garbage song that you know that it was like, you thought of this 10 minutes ago, friend. And
but she'd been thinking about it.
Right. She'd been planning it in her head elaborately. There's also like a scene where they do a fashion show on the USS Intrepid, which they do multiple times in like they go on to military vessels at multiple times in the show and do fashion shows for like the Navy men, who are always very confused as to why they're there. And they do on I also watch Australia's Next Normal. And they did it. I just watched an episode of that where they go on to like the USS, that would not be it. Whatever the ship in Melbourne is. And they're like doing this runway show in front of these Australian sailors. Except in America, all the sailors are kind of like, what are we doing here? And in Australia, they're all like catcalling the girls and like hooting at them. And I was like, this is uncomfortable. But not to generalize about people, but all the Australian girls are mostly like, we loved it. Okay, Australia.
Here's a question I have, Mackenzi, and I don't know if you know this.
Probably.
A big part of this plot hinges on Mason's plagiarized Time magazine body image issue. And they talk about that like it's such a famous photo shoot and like this technique, like only this one guy knows how to do it, and it's been copied. And they never really describe what it looks like, and I couldn't figure out what it was supposed to be. Do you know what this is?
Either, honestly.
Okay.
Especially because Time magazine doesn't really do fashion photography.
Right.
So that was the
so
first
I
bit.
was trying to think like, oh, was this like the Sports Illustrated? But the Sports Illustrated body issue is just like, you know, they're like nude artfully. Like there's not like a
and that's
special
not
technique to that.
well, and also the special technique that they describe that Mason can't figure out seems to just be like putting a filter on it.
Right.
Like he doesn't ever describe what the technique is, because I don't think he knows, because he can't come up with anything. I don't know of what it's referencing.
Okay.
I mean, I know they do a lot of photo shoots that like directly reference things specifically that Tyra has done, so she can be like, I've had to do this. Or they'll do like ridiculous bullshit runway shows where they're like walking between swinging pendulums or like walking in hamster balls over a swimming pool, and she'll be like, they actually did this in the Chanel runway last year, and then they show a much more toned down version of it where there's a line in the beginning that I loved that I forgot to mark, that when Keisha and Pablo are first having their ice cream binging orgy, and she's eating dulce de leche, and there's some line about like her tears fell into the ice cream, now it was salted caramel, and it's like, are you kidding?
Incredible. Iconic.
This book was
Incredible.
so much.
The prose is too much. There is probably 90% more words in this book than there need to be, and half of them are the wrong word.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
and 30% of them are incorrectly capitalized,
and the rest are italicized. Can we talk about also how Jay is constantly commenting, as much as he comments on Tyra's or Keisha's semi-speltness, he's also constantly like, Pablo's looking at himself in mirrors and being like, I look good with my silver hair. But also at the end when he like says, fuck you, Keisha, he takes out the silver contacts she gave him and flicks them at her, which was also, I lost my mind. But there's so many points where he's like commenting on like my toned abs and my handsome shoulders, and there's a part where like him and his imaginary friend De La Renta are in a diner eating, and he's like, De La Renta's stuffing his face with bacon and eggs and it's greasy and gross and he's fat. I'm eating healthy breakfast because I always eat healthy foods. And he's working so hard to make himself seem like flawless. Again, it's like a Mary Sue, like flawlessly cultured. He's like, when he's in his apartment, he's like, Siri, play Tchaikovsky's something. This classical music always settles him down, and like it's just.
But when he's in the diner, the healthy breakfast he orders for himself is a bowl of oatmeal with bananas and nuts and 5 soft-boiled eggs. Is he Gaston? It's 5 eggs.
Well, with De La Renta, I kept thinking of I saw a couple of years ago the Broadway production of Aladdin, and they have Iago in the Broadway production, but he's not a bird. It's like a man that hangs out with Jafar. And
by the way, the musical of Aladdin is cowardly for that choice, but continue.
So
they removed all of the animal sidekicks, and I hated it. That's all.
That's a different podcast. Animal sidekicks and Broadway musicals. But at the end of the show, my friend and I were talking about it. We were like, is Iago never talked to anybody but Jafar? We were like, is he a bird? Is he a man? Is he real? Because he never interacts with anyone but Jafar. And it's never cleared up what he's supposed to be. And I felt that way about De La Renta the whole book too. I was like, are you real? Are you a figment of imagination? Because he also just like seems to pop in a lot. I legitimately thought there was going to be a twist halfway through where they were like, Pablo, De La Renta's been dead for 7 years.
Well, and other people in crew referred to him as Switzerland, which of course just made me think of Twilight.
When did they do that in Twilight?
Bella is Switzerland. I guess it's in the later books. Like whenever Jacob and Edward are fighting, she's like, I'm Switzerland.
Oh, I didn't
trust me.
My only interactions with the Twilight books are your podcast, and then how did this get made? Your dick's gonna kill her, which is my favorite thing that's ever happened.
It's extremely good. Yeah, but also Bella is Switzerland and De La Renta is Switzerland.
I have a very distinct memory of climbing Arthur's seat in Edinburgh while listening to that episode of How Did This Get Made and listening to, who is it that says that?
It's their guest.
And I can't remember Doug, is it?
Oh yeah, I think it's Doug Loves Movies.
Yeah, I can't think of his name. But I was like on this trail and it was super icy, and that cart came up and I had to like stop and sit down on the trail. And I'm just like this crazy woman who's like on all fours hiking up Arthur's seat because it's so icy, and then just suddenly like rolls onto her back and is just like laying on the side of the trail laughing.
Yeah, and you can't explain it.
No.
I mean, that's me on the
Why
MBTA constantly in the before times, like on a packed bus, squished between people, listening to the new Mabim Bam, crying, laughing, while people are trying to like put as much space between them and myself as possible.
Oh, guys, we're so cool.
Greetings, podcast listeners. We also listen to podcasts. We're
Welcome
just
back to
like
podcast talk.
We heard you like podcasts, so we put some podcasts in your podcast.
Can we talk about the character of Joe Vong, who is Ken Mock, who is one of the producers of ANTM, who Jay, of all the characters in this that he does a disservice to in their real life counterparts, Ken Mock is literally just like, all the descriptions are like, he pouted evilly, he cried like a little boy. Like, it is cartoonish how
Totally.
in a book of cartoon characters, Joe Vong, who he also always describes as like the little Korean man, and I'm like, ooh, that's don't like that.
It is very bad. It's very bad. It feels like I kept expecting him to turn out to be like evil, for there to be some twist where it was like, oh, and the entire time he was doing, I don't know, some terrible thing. Where, granted, if this sexual assault that is described in the book happened in real life, like, I can understand why you would be like, oh, like, this man blew me off when I had like a legitimate horrible thing happen to me, and now I want to get back at him. But like, it seems as if that was maybe made up for the book. So
but
there's
Pablo doesn't report the sexual assault to Joe Vong, does he? He reports it to Keisha.
And he, at some point, he finds out that Joe knew and wanted to keep it quiet. And I can't remember if it's because Keisha told him or something, but like, there's definitely a point where he knew as well, because then later when Bryce finds out, that's part of the reason why he fires Joe Vong, isn't it?
Sorry, do you mean Bryce?
Yes.
Bryce, yes.
The
The absolute real name that exists, Bryce.
A name that's less of a name and more of a speech impediment.
Because I think that's part of the reason why he fires Joe, is because he's like, this happened and you let it happen and you didn't tell anyone, and like, we're not like that here. Now I gotta look for it.
Well, and evilly.
And Keisha kind of threw him under the bus, though, I feel like, because she was like, anyway, it doesn't really matter, but
I just, of all the cartoonish portrayals in a book of cartoonish portrayals, that one it was not even one dimensional, it was like 0.5 dimensional.
Yeah, no, there's clearly an axe to grind with Ken Mock, who's like never on camera. Like, I don't know anything about this. Like, I know the name from the credits, and that's all.
So I just opened to a line I marked. Joe was in a dysmorphic rage and hissed at the self-satisfied manager.
Jeez.
What are these sentences? Also, we have not yet talked about, and I'm sad we missed this on the podcast, there's a whole section where instead of doing smizing, Tyra makes them do duck face.
Yes. He makes them do duck face. She makes them do duck face. And in the book, Pablo is like, a duck face is so over, which it is. So it's very weird. Because, like, say what you will, smizing is so uniquely Tyra, and duck face is like,
well,
so
and
generic.
the whole thing where she's like, we're going to do the duck face lab test and we're in a LED computer screen simulation, is like a real thing they do in one of the cycles, where she like makes them put on these weird cat suits and cover their faces and you can just see their eyes, and they have like a smize meter that they look into, and it's a very odd challenge. And so I think maybe what he was trying to reference here is just the fact that like the whole smize and then her continued coining of terms like booty tooch and flossom and pod leadum and all of these things just kind of got out of control. So I don't know if that's what it was trying to make a reference to, but yeah.
I'm still looking to see what the...
Also on this page is talking about the contestant Kayla who sleeps with the producer, and then you find out she also sleeps with Bill, the camera guy, I think. And so the line is, she could have got, because she gets gonorrhea from Andy, the agent. So she could have gotten gonorrhea from Bill, for Christ's sake. You fucked her too? Joe turned and screamed at Bill. Only oral, Bill assured him. And I love the idea of this like cameraman who sees this beautiful model and just like wants to like, all I want to do is eat your pussy. Like, again, I'm like, do you get how sad? Because it's not that she, it's just the way it was phrased. What is happening? What is happening? She doesn't understand heterosexuals.
So Joe is fired because he didn't tell about the assault, and he says, it was my understanding no charges were going to be filed. So I didn't see the point in involving the network in something that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, but that happens because Keisha tells him not to.
Yeah.
So if he only heard about this from Keisha, like, I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
But it seemed like it was more about Keisha throwing him under the bus. I mean, I guess a truly good character would have been like, no, I insist that he be fired, and I insist that we do something about this. But if he's receiving a message from Keisha that like, well, it wasn't really a big deal, like, I don't know.
So 2 other things he references a lot in this book that are very top metal are every time the girls or anybody screams or like squeaks, he has like a visceral reaction to it and how much he hates it. And this is the thing on the show that they like tell all the girls, like, whenever Tyra comes in, you all have to scream. But every time it happens in the book, it happens like 18 times, he has to put in a reference to it and then be like, Pablo hated the sound of women screaming. Ugh, girls. And then also he talks a lot about, so Tyra a lot of the time on the show does this very uncomfortable baby voice, and also refers to herself as mama a lot, which like De Laurenta calls her mother in the book. And will always say to like the girls, she's like, mama's gonna teach you how to be a supermodel. And I don't know if she was like having, because also we know now that like she had trouble conceiving and really wanted a kid. So I'm wondering if she was just, this is like how her baby craziness was manifesting, is that she was like, I'm gonna adopt all these models.
But now you made it sad, Mackenzi.
I know, I'm sorry. But she has a son now, and I legitimately think Tyra Banks would be a great mom, because she's like exactly the kind of zaniness you want, and she does have moments of like real loveliness with the contestants, especially in early seasons. But he talks all the time, like when Keisha's at her worst, how she slips into like creepy baby voice. And I felt very validated just in like, oh, Jay also noticed that he also did not care for every time Tyra would slip into her creepy Tyra baby voice.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, her whole like public image is so interesting, and I can't really think of anyone else quite like her, where she on one hand is like so kind of fun and goofy and charming, but also like a little bit unhinged. Like I would believe anything of Tyra Banks almost, but I don't necessarily like a lot of the stuff where like, oh, she just like had this vision and she delayed production because she really wanted it to be this color, or like she really wanted this particular animal even though everyone said it was unrealistic. Like I can believe those kinds of things of her. It is hard for me to imagine her as like a truly malicious person.
Yeah, I don't think she's malicious. And I think Jay has even said in his like talks leading up to the book that she's extremely non-confrontational. And so that was part of their falling out, was that she kind of always sent somebody else to like do the dirty work, and he would always hear like third hand that he was fired or whatever. And he was like, we're friends, like just tell me. And so I don't know if that's part of his like fictionalization of her, is that in the book she's very confrontational and she's very hot-headed, whereas real Tyra is apparently very non-confrontational. But yeah, I agree with that, Renata, in that she's not unhinged. Like she's not like Kanye West, where you're like, ooh, this is kind of, something bad is going to happen here. But she's like delusional in kind of a fun way, where when she says she's going to open a theme park in a mall in California for models where everyone can be and I'm like, yeah, of course you are.
And when COVID is over, I do want to go there.
Oh my God.
Yes, Patreon goal.
Of all the things COVID took from us, Model Land is really the greatest loss. But now we have Smize cream now. Did you see that?
No, tell me more.
She is starting an ice cream line called Smize Cream, which has a very so the first flavor they announced is like waffle, meatless bacon, and maple syrup, something like that. It has a very confusing element where there's like a chunk of cookie dough in it or something that you have to like dig and find, kind of like a king cake in Mardi Gras, and you like find the little, I couldn't tell if it was like supposed to be just like, she's like, so as Tyra said, it's part of the gamification of eating ice cream. Don't get it.
How is it that we have ice cream like this and nobody will make a non-dairy chocolate ice cream with peanut butter swirl in it? How do we have Smize cream and not the one ice cream in the world that I would like to exist? Okay, I'm done now.
Maybe you need to reach out to Smize Cream and tell them about underrepresented ice cream flavors that you would like to see in there. This could be your moment.
Can it looks like the product has launched, so she's probably not open to feedback at this point. Smize cream.
Let's be real. She's never open to feedback.
Smize cream to me sounds like an eye cream, like a beauty product, and not like a food product.
One would think that.
Smize cream. Okay, guess how many likes Smize cream has on Facebook right now?
230.
Kait,
high or low?
What's your guess?
Nope. Got to guess, Kait. No Price is Right.
Oh, yeah, price.
I don't know. 250,000.
Okay. Mackenzie is correct. Or Mackenzie's closest. There are 356 likes.
Oh my gosh, I thought I was way lowballing it.
No, you're so close. And 373 people follow it. So a few more like didn't want to like it, but do want to keep their eyes on Smize cream.
I don't have it on the record that I like this product, but I am curious as to where it's going.
Also, the logo looks like the cover of Model Land. It's like a basic triangle, like a cone, and then a purple circle, but then this really exaggerated yellow and green eye with like huge eyelashes.
That's kind of her thing. Were you following the like Model Land when it was about to open? I have no idea how far it actually got, but they kept like announcing they were casting people, but they wouldn't say what for or how Model Land worked, or they were like, he's going to be playing Bestero, and you're like, I don't know who that is, and they're like, we can't tell you, but you're going to love him as Bestero, and we're like, we don't know what that means, and she's like, you will, and I'm like, I don't think you know either. And they had the eye thing is very like present in all the Model Land marketing too. I think it's just like her icon because her eyes are her trademark.
And in Model Land, that's like the thing is like you get this icon of a yellow eye.
Oh, the thing that comes out of the faucet, right?
Yeah, which I think also was called a Smize.
It is called a Smize.
Yeah.
So I have a friend who a pivotal moment in our friendship early on was both realizing that we both love top model. When we were sharing a New York hotel room during a book event that literally had bunk beds, like adult bunk beds in this room. Wow. And then about like this much space between them, and then a bathroom that just had a sliding like paper thing over the toilet. It was bad. But we were in this hotel room and I was trying to secretly watch Top Model in my top bunk. And she was like, what are you watching? And I was like, Top Model. And she's like, oh, I haven't seen the new episode. And I was like, now we're best friends. And
Incredible.
one year for Christmas, I got her a copy of Model Land, and I signed it as Tyra Banks and wrote this like elaborate inscription of it. And like 2 months out, first of all, she did not appreciate it. About 2 months after Christmas, she texted me and she was like, okay, do you want this back? Because she says, every person who has come over to my house in a wall full of books inevitably picks that one out every time and says, what's that? And she goes, I can't keep explaining the Tyra Banks novel to you.
Rude.
I know. I was furious. I was like, Tyra Banks signed that for you.
I mean, the amount of terrible books that I have on my bookshelf because of this stupid podcast. I feel like there's a good story there. I feel like that's to be like, oh my God, Tyra Banks wrote this terrible novel. My friend gave it to me as a joke. Like that's a cute story. Anyway, not to throw shade on your friend.
I agree. Also,
by the way,
oh my gosh.
Wait, sorry, I'm not ready to finish on Smize cream because I am down a little hole here. And I went in their Instagram, which does have more followers on Instagram, but then they have a link tree. And if you click on the link tree, the only link from their Instagram says join our team, ice cream emoji. But then you click it and it's jobs at Model Land, jobs listing.
Oh my God.
So,
can you work at Model Land? What are
So,
they hiring for?
okay. So there's an ice cream and retail shop, but it's under the heading of Model Land. So I think maybe this is like the food court at the Model Land in Santa Monica.
I'm into it.
They are hiring an assistant manager and VIP host, cleaner for ice cream shop, and sales and cashier.
I'm going to apply for all of those. So a friend of mine has the same editor that Tyra Banks had for Model Land. And when I found this out, I flipped out and was trying to like ask my friend all these questions. And she's like, I don't know. I just know that she had the edit. Like, I just know that she edited her. But apparently Tyra, because it's Random House, isn't it? Is that the publisher? I think it's Random House.
I don't remember.
And she got a major publisher, unlike Jay.
She did, yes. But Tyra would just like randomly show up at the Random House offices and like plant in this editor's office and be like, hey, and like sit down and start writing. And the editor's like, what do you do? And she's like, I'm writing my book. That's why you're my editor. I come to your office and I write my book in your office. She's like, no, not how this works.
Incredible.
And I just love the idea of Random House security being told, like, watch out for Tyra Banks. Please don't let her in the building.
Redirect her to Virgil's barbecue. Oh my gosh.
What else do we need to talk about in here? I have so many lines marked and so many like specific top model reference, even just like dumb things. Like there's the shoot where they do the camel and the one girl is like gracefully getting on the camel as it like stands up. And I was like, well, that's a reference to Joni and the elephant and also to Molly on the camel. Like I have so many dumb things like that that are flags that I'm like, we can't go through them all or we'll be here for the rest of our lives and everyone will be bored.
I'm going back through my notes. I do feel like a real weight has been lifted from my chest. I feel like I have gotten a lot of this out of my system that was left lingering after just the podcast.
Yes, agreed. I do think for me, the two realest moments in the book were the line about if I knew how little they paid me and how much novels were how much work novels were, I would never have done it. I felt that deeply. And I put that on my Instagram story and had so many author friends react to it that I was like, oh, we all get this. The other moment for me that felt deeply real was when Jay Pablo hosts the Emmys on the red carpet with Heidi Klum and everyone's like congratulating him. And then all Keisha posts on Instagram is a picture of herself. And then there's like a vague post, shady caption that's like, celebrity isn't real or magical. One night on the red carpet doesn't make you a star. I was like, how many times have I seen something good happen to someone and then somebody else who you know they don't like or whatever will post some like shitty, shady caption that's like, we all know what this is about. That also felt very, very real to me. So like the shady vague post.
I don't know if there's anything else that's specifically I mean, aside from just fucking everything, this book is just it felt like some elaborate revenge fantasy that you have like in the shower at 2 a.m. where you're like, oh yeah, like when I go on this talk show, you know, when I get famous and I say like, oh, well, you know, sometimes I wonder about this person who was mean to me once and what they're doing. But you know what? I'm a bigger person now, you know, Jon Stewart or whatever. Like it felt very...
Do you have beef with Jon Stewart?
No, I don't know
Kate's imagining herself talking to Jon Stewart.
Yeah, I don't know any current talk show hosts. I don't know anyone.
Kate is throwing shade at Trevor Noah and returning too.
Well, I was wondering. I was also thinking maybe you were fantasizing about Rob Lowe, who can't read. And if maybe he's the person you would vague post about Jon Stewart, about some illiterate celebrity.
By the way, my friend Steve, who read the Rob Lowe book with us for the podcast and who joins me in my rivalry with Rob Lowe because we were collectively blown off by Rob Lowe together at the stage door of A Few Good Men, which launched this decades-long rivalry that Rob Lowe doesn't know about. Anyway, Steve works for the
one-sided rivalry.
Steve works for the insurance company State Farm, and Rob Lowe has a new podcast that is sponsored by State Farm. So
He has to quit his job immediately.
I know, like the principle of the thing. And also, why is State Farm sponsoring Rob Lowe's podcast? I can't.
Why is State Farm sponsoring podcasts?
I can't get my mind around any of it. I haven't listened to the podcast and I never will, but it seems like it's just like a celebrity interview show. Like it's called Literally, and it seems like it's just him talking to.
So you mean the show that every celebrity is starting in quarantine because they're all bored and all they can think to do is talk to other celebrities?
Yes, exactly. It seems like it's just that. Like it would be one thing if it was like, I don't know, Vin Diesel talking about cars, and it's like, okay, they do car insurance and you're talking about cars. I get it.
Truly my favorite kind of podcast is the genre of true crime in which it's two men talking about the violent murder of a woman, and then there will be a pause and it'll cut to, ladies, are you looking for a perfect bra that fits you like a glove? Try Third Love. Like everything about this I hate. Everything about this. I don't know what else I want to say about this, but I feel like we need to say one more time, this is a book that includes both a Tyra Banks character being sent a Da Vinci Code-esque cipher and a vial of blood that she has to decode to get her mother out of jail after she was wrongly arrested for stealing Elizabeth Taylor's jewels. And also a scene where a plus-size model eats oysters until she goes into anaphylactic shock and has to have her leg cut off. And then a third scene in which a girl's the hair from a shaved head is taken from locks of love from children with cancer, made into a wig for Tyra Banks, ripped off her head, and then the contestant places it back on her own head. All of these things happen in this book,
and
I didn't enjoy any of them.
That all of those things happen very close to each other in the last quarter of the book. So you need to get through this much of the book first before any of those things even happen. The fact that nothing about the mom subplot makes sense. If all they needed was a blood test to prove that she didn't do it.
How does blood exonerate you from jewel theft?
And where did she get the blood? And it was just dropped off. It wasn't in a cooler. That blood would be gross. Okay, here's one. Maybe this will be my final statement. Is I have highlighted this line. Gossip spread through their production like STDs on The Bachelor, which I think is actually a pretty funny and good line. But so recently we read the first time the Bachelor memoir, and I was like, oh, I should do a little homework and watch a few episodes of The Bachelor, which I never had gotten into really. And I watched 1.5 episodes and I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah. And then for this, I was like, I should rewatch some Top Model to get into this. And I watched one episode, and then I watched the whole season. I watched it in 3 days, and it just, and I haven't, it's been a while since I watched it, since now I don't have that parents' house cable experience. I do have to go to Amazon and click it and seek it out. But once I had reintroduced it into my bloodstream, I was like, this show is so watchable. It's
Top
just
Model it is a credit to Tyra Banks, truly, that she created a show in sort of an era before reality TV, really. And she created a show that when I go back and watch the early seasons, for every blackface photo shoot they're doing, they're also having they also have Miss J on there, who is an openly gender fluid presenting person before that was happening. And you have Isis King on there, who is a trans model talking about transitioning. And you have Ebony and Kayla. And
there's a lesbian out in season 1 who brings her girlfriend over to the house.
Yeah, and they're talking about colorism, and they're talking about body positivity and things. She honestly did a lot of work that I don't think we give her credit for, because it doesn't always shine. Because what you remember when you think of Top Model is just the batshit. As Jay Manuel would say, I believe there's a line that says batshit as a fox or something. But we remember Smize and Booty Tooch and race blackface photo shoots. But really, I think Tyra deserves a lot of credit for helping create a format that was then copied by lots of shows and copied unsuccessfully by a lot of shows too. She definitely cracked into something with this. And I think she's like you said, I think she's a cool, delusional lady. I think she would be fun and nuts to hang out with for like one afternoon.
Yeah.
And I think
that's also, so like, I can imagine when they actually were pitching Next Top Model that it would have been maybe a hard sell. And that was partly why it was so wild to have this, where they're in like the year 2019 being like, no, it'll never work, but just trust me, just trust us. We can do the show. It'll be just like America's Next Top Model that's been very successful for the last 15 years. But anyway, take a long shot on this show. Like, it's so weird.
Well, even the face gets a shout out, which was Naomi Campbell's short-lived America's Next Top Model ripoff that was, I think, 3 seasons, and has Coco Rocha as a judge on one of those seasons.
Oh, okay.
If you really want to like do the crossover. But yeah, I think as many flaws as Tyra Banks probably has, as harshly judged as she is by our popular culture, and as poorly as Top Model sometimes holds up in a rewatch, I think Jay does her a huge disservice in this book. And he does everybody in this book a terribly,
and to everyone.
Yeah.
Unless Jay actually was violently sexually assaulted on the show and everyone made him cover it up. Like,
in which case they all deserve this book.
Right. But there's just no signs that is what happened. And he isn't saying it himself. He's just like, no, this book is satire. It didn't happen. But
there's so many things that so clearly did happen that I honestly, like, I don't know what Jay wanted. Well, I think Jay wanted me to come out of this book being like, poor Jay Manuel. He had to hold this show afloat for years without any credit. And instead I came out of it and like, I was like, poor Tyra and Miss J and Nigel, who had to work with this monster that was just, this book puts me in a position of sympathizing with Ken Mock.
Yes.
Like, my God, Ken Mock, the most evil, tiny man.
Like, the thing that still like completely, we talked about this a little bit when we recorded the podcast, that I guess this is my last thought, is that it just like the lack of self-awareness in that you are writing a very poorly structured book, and just there's never a moment, a heartwarming moment where it's like, oh, like Keisha Cash is a person, like Keisha Cash is a good friend, Keisha Cash is like looking out for this guy and that's why he likes her. Like, there's never, it is clear from day one that she is conniving and that she only wants to use him until she can't get anything else from him anymore. There is no logic to their relationship, which is what is supposed to carry the first 2/3 of the book before there's the turning point where he's like, oh no, she's bad. And it just doesn't exist. So the concept that this book is built on does not exist.
But none of it really exists, because even that turning point is so muddy that you kind of don't realize there's been a turning point, because he doesn't seem to really feel different about her drastically. Like, before he also recognized she was garbage, and now he's just like recognizing she's super garbage. And like Pablo has no discernible character arc. Pablo has no discernible flaws, both physically and mentally. Like, he is fixing everything. Nothing stops him, nothing fells him. He solves everybody's problems all the time. Everybody
His
loves
flaws
him.
are that he works too hard.
Exactly.
And he trusts people too much.
Exactly. Whereas, yeah, like you said, Keisha is such a nightmare from day one that there is no conceivable reason for why. So as he's telling us, like, oh, we're friends, I'm like, no, you're not. You hate her. Like, from day one, you hate her. Oh, one more thing. Was anyone else surprised there wasn't a love story in this? I kept waiting for Jay and like Bryce to have a thing. Jay, Pablo.
Well, Jay, so I have like 10,000 tabs open about Jay, and they're like, Jay is like famously private about his personal life. So that maybe even to hint at it, he was like, well, I know all this other stuff I'm putting in here is true, ? So maybe he didn't even want to include
I think I just assumed, because Pablo is such a desirable man all around, that the men would just be falling all over themselves to get to him.
And it also just doesn't come up.
Yeah.
Like, he, aside from like the vague bits at the beginning where he's like, oh, like, is Mason coming on to me? Like, oh, like, am I into this? I don't know if I am. And then like very abruptly he's like, oh no, I'm not. But like, aside from that, there's not even any like, oh man, like, I'm so busy, I don't have time to have a boyfriend, and it's real sad because like I'm so hot and I'm wasting this on not being with anyone. It's just like a issue outside of the awkward sexual assault plotline.
Yeah, and like I don't think it needed it, but you're right, it is surprising that there, just because of how vain the rest of the book is, that he doesn't have like a male model boyfriend or something who's
I just kept, especially I think Royce, who's kind of just this weird god that occasionally flits into like side
Tell
with
everyone
Jay.
how great Pablo
Yeah,
is.
exactly. I was like, surely he's here for a reason, and he's so obsessed with Pablo that surely they're gonna hook up and that's like the happy ending. But what do I know about story structure?
I'll tell you a secret. You know more than Jay Manuel.
Yeah, I mean, I think I am pretty confident in that. I don't mean to boast, but
yeah, I mean, for starters, all of your books are much better than this.
they have the appropriate amount of italics and commas and capitalizations.
Mm-hmm.
They have a
They have
beginning,
been-
middle, and end.
They have
have
been
it-
read by an editor.
You didn't have to pay money to publish them.
None of the characters are versions of people I know with just like the first letter of their name changed.
Your cover was made by an actual human and not like in Photoshop with a candy doll maker.
I feel so professional, and I've never felt more valid in my career before.
Yeah.
I can't get, why doesn't he have a nose? Someone
It's-
please explain. It's so upsetting.
It really is.
Oh, I don't like it.
The cover illustration is by Aaron Favaloro, who did a bad job.
Did he or did cover designer Litsa Vinitizalello do the bad job?
I feel like both of these names are anagrams, and if we
That's what I was just gonna say too.
Quick, someone Google the WikiHow page on how to solve anagrams. We got this.
I mean, we know it's out. We know how to solve an anagram now. Let's do it. Lord. Closing thoughts? Anything else?
Yeah, this is a good way to spend the afternoon. I'm glad. Reading this book was rough, but I have truly enjoyed discussing it further.
I was gonna say, even if no one
Legit.
watches this was good like therapy that I needed after reading it.
Yes, exactly.
It answered so many questions, but also posed so many more
Right.
questions.
This book is an enigma. Truly.
Wrapped in a mystery, wrapped in a model muse hoodie that was traded at a prison commissary.
Okay, can we talk about the fact that the main currency at this women's prison is America's Next Top Models or Model Muse swag? Like, what the fuck? I can't. That was another part where I just like screamed out loud. Couldn't
And
handle it.
the abrupt everything about it.
Everything. It's a perfect disaster.
Yes, absolutely. It's like The Room of novels.
Yes, with actually the room might be slightly more self-aware than with the bitch in the meltdown. Okay.
Thanks for having this, video therapy session about
Yes.
this terrible book with us.
Yeah, we
Yes.
needed this.
Thank you for joining us.
Of course.
I mean, you can find a podcast at worstbestsellers.com. If you're here, you know this.
It's
If you've
true.
made it to the end of this Patreon bonus video.
Yeah, you probably, in fact, you literally cannot access this video in the form that we are currently thinking of releasing it unless you know where to find the podcast.
So good. You solved the anagram.
Please write all the copy for this podcast, like all of the reader advisory that you put in the comments. Please write it all in anagrams and make our listeners translate it. Be like, you have the tools, you have the WikiHow page.
I'm going to cut out magazines and make a collage.
Perfect. And please include a vial of lukewarm blood.
We gave you all the clues. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
I love reading terrible books with you guys.
We're so glad. Thank you for joining us. Thanks to everyone who watched this. Thanks for supporting our Patreon.
I guess that's all.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Yay. This was so fun, guys. I'm so
Yes.
sorry I made you read this book, but it was really
Yeah, it was a delight.
Yes. It was a
And
great.
it was a delight to talk about it.
It was.
Yes.
I had way more fun talking to you guys about it than I did actually reading the book.
Yeah, reading
Yes.
it was a slog.
Yes.
It was more of a slog than I thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to breeze through it and it would be fun and stupid. No,
I was really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and by the last like 30, 50 pages, I was like, every 2 pages, I'd be like, are we done yet? There's so little left. There can't be anything significant happening. And yet here's a model shitting in the sink of their Park Avenue apartment. Okay. Farewell, my friends. Take care.
Bye.
Take care of yourself during all of this crazy insanity. Please read books that are not just your worst bestseller books for your own brain.
You know, by the time this comes out, I think this is going to be after the election. So.
Oh God.
Oh.
So let's just tell our past selves right now. Remember what it's like to. I was gonna say be hopeful, but I really don't even feel hopeful right now.
No. Whatever happened, we in the past are there for you in the future, I guess.
Much like Jay Manuel and Pablo Michaels, we can text our past selves and tell them everything is going to be all right. What the hell is that?
Gritty is here also to provide comfort in these trying times.
I don't know if I like that creature more or less than the cover of The Wig, the Bitch, and the Meltdown.
More.
What is it?
It's a gritty.
What is a gritty? You say that like I should know it.
It's a gritty. He is the mascot of the Philadelphia Flyers hockey team. You don't know Gritty?
No.
I don't know
Stop
hockey.
saying that like it's a normal thing I should know.
It's like he's super become a meme over the past few years.
Because I guess the NHL made every team make a mascot, and the Flyers didn't, like a person creature type thing, and the Flyers didn't have one, so they're like, fine, it's this. And then everyone loved it because this was like 2 years ago, and everyone I think was just sort of like, we're starved for things that are nice. We will
Little did they know.
We will accept this creature. And then he's also become sort of like a anarchist meme, or like you'll see a lot of protest signs with Gritty.
Okay, well, I have to look him up.
Please.
I'm into this.
His Instagram is really good. The Queer Eye guys gave him a makeover.
Oh my God. Okay, I need to look up this anarchist inflated Muppet NHL mascot.
Please.
A sentence that sounds straight out of The Wig, the Bitch, and the Meltdown.
It really does. I love Gritty. I've never watched a hockey game.
He's very cute. Okay, take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.